Hi everyone, Vic here, and I'm interviewing Brooke Gardner today. And our topic is all around the NDIS. So, what the NDIS is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And this is like a government funding for people living with a disability so they can access different services. So, it might be support workers if they need help or assistance with their daily living, or it might be access to professionals like a speech therapist or an OT. So, this podcast is all about the starting journey for parents that might have just received a diagnosis for their child. Firstly, a big hug for that one, because I know when you do get a child's diagnosis, it is quite a hard process and it might just hit you really, really hard. And it's also isolating as well. And I know Brooke will probably speak about her experience shortly as well. But just so you know, you're not alone. There's plenty of people going through the same thing that you're going through as well. So let's hope this podcast answers some of your questions about the NDIS. So, Brooke, let's talk a little bit about your story and your background and what got you started working in the NDIS industry.
Okay, sure. Well, I guess it starts with my little boy, Locke. He's 10 now. And when he was, right from the start, I guess, it was a different parenting journey than my friends with babies had. He cried more. He didn't sleep forever. He was a fussier eater. And I don't mean that in the way of, some kids don't like avocado. I mean, like, he would only eat really specific foods. He wouldn't sleep in a strange environment, and even just the beginnings of it is isolating. You have friends who go to barbecues and their kid will sleep at the same time they sleep at home, but they'll sleep in a spare room at someone else's house. Never. That would never, ever have happened for us. Just things. And then he started kindergarten. And by the April, his teachers pulled us aside and said, look, there's something. There's something. He has an explosive temper. Most of the time, he's the sweetest peach you've ever met in your whole life, but he can be explosive. He gets really traumatized by changes in the setting or changes in the environment. And they identified that he was struggling with what they referred to as his receptive and expressive language. So really unique things like he knew that he was a boy and he could tell that you were a girl. But when all the kids sat on the rug together, this is the first example that they gave me and it stayed with me forever. When all the kids would sit on the rug together, they would say, okay, all the boys can hop up and go move over to the play equipment. And he wouldn't move. But if you said, look, are you a boy? He'd say, yes, of course, yes. Is that a girl? Yes, yes. But that statement, all the boys, he couldn't absorb it and process it in a way that then applied to him. And there were other examples as well. I remember he failed his colour and shape test in kindergarten spectacularly, like got nothing right. And what they had done was they had given them a colour, like a piece of paper, and they'd said, colour in the triangle red, and he could do that. He knew red, he knew triangle. But when they said, okay, colour in all of these things, and they gave him multiple instructions, he just couldn't do it. So he just coloured everything in red. So then they sat with him and they did it the second day, and they said, what shape is this? He knew them all, every single individual one. And now, what colour is this? And he knew every single one. But he couldn't put the instructions together. They had to break them out for him. And it turned out he was the only kid in the class that knew every shape and every colour, but he couldn't put them all together. So they wrote us a letter basically talking about what he was struggling with, and they recommended that we look into a speech therapist to help him with expressive and receptive language. And that kind of started our journey, I guess. We met the most amazing speech therapist. She was absolutely beautiful, and she just did so well with him. And they just clicked straight away. and they started working on things, and we definitely saw improvements, and we started understanding more. And after she worked with him for quite a while, she recommended that we go to a pediatrician, and that perhaps he would be able to shed some light on perhaps what was going on, which we got on the waiting list, and we did. And then in prep, he saw the pediatrician and he did all of the things. And the pediatrician came back and said to us, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, level 2, ADHD, and anxiety. So 3 A's. And exactly what you said. You knew that there was something, but it's still this complete gut check when you hear it. And then you start spiraling about what does that mean, and what is that going to look like for him, and what's his life going to be, and how can I help? And it's overwhelming. There's so much information, and yet knowing what pieces to pull out still feels overwhelming. And we were really lucky. His school that he's at is beautiful, and his prep teacher, she was just glorious. And they just did so much work with him and so much specialized things, asking him questions individually instead of applying the bulk questioning to it, just little things that made a huge amount of difference. But from there, we contacted, so with the NDIS, if you have a child under 9, you go through the early childhood, early intervention program. And it's nice. They were really good to us. We sent them our diagnosis, and you fill out the application forms. And then you get essentially a partner that works with you on what that looks like. And then from there you move forward, and it goes through the access eligibility criteria. But that sort of changed our whole life, really. And then eventually I was changing roles, and I happened to see a support coordination position available. And I come from a very corporate background, advertising, marketing, sales, not at all community services, but my life had changed so dramatically, and I was so entrenched in community services that I thought maybe I'll see. And I went right through the interview process and started work there. And I've been doing it for 3 years now, and I love it. I love being able to take what I learned on our journey with Locks and apply it to other people and try and help them through the process and help them with support.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks for telling us your background, because I know it can be quite an emotional journey and story. And I know even just reflecting on the process can bring up those emotions as well. But it just shows us that, like, we're human and we go through these things just like everyone else. So when you got your letter or diagnosis from the pediatrician, how long did it take then to get funding with the NDIS?
Months. It's not a short process, but it also wasn't terrible. The form is big and it feels daunting at first. But really, you're just putting all the information together and gathering reports from everybody that's been involved. So the school wrote us a letter. We had a letter from the kindergarten. The speech therapist wrote us a letter. At that point, the speech therapist had also recommended occupational therapy. So we were seeing an occupational therapist as well. And they wrote us a letter. We just put them all together and sent them away. And then we started getting contacted by the early childhood, early intervention partners. I think it was Uniting Care.
Yep. So in Toowoomba, for the listeners, there is early intervention, like Brooke said, for under 9, and that is called Uniting Care. And they deal with everyone's plan in our local area for clients under 9 years.
That's right.
Yep.
So they reached out, and then we started having conversations around what Loxley struggled with and what he needed and what kind of support would best benefit us. And they gave really strong advice around, what that looks like and what So the NDIS bases a lot of their funding around goals. And so they worked with us on what those goals look like, specifically to him. Everything is very personalised. And then about a month later, we had a planning meeting and we just reviewed all of those goals and all of the evidence. And then a few weeks later, we had a plan.
And I'm sure that would have helped because you're already accessing speech therapy and OT as well, and that can
So
be quite
much
hefty out of pocket.
It is.
So you've explained once a family is eligible, what's the process? But how can a family know if their child is eligible for NDIS? And I know with early intervention, you don't exactly need a diagnosis.
That's right, for under 6. So for under 6, I believe you don't need a diagnosis. They recognise global development delays. So I think you can reach out to Uniting Care at any point and talk to them about your concerns. And then I know that they will then point you in the right direction. But for us, they talked a lot about the reports that we had. So when we started from that kindergarten moment onwards, when we knew that there was a problem, we were already engaging with people and we were starting to try to identify what that looked like. Long before there was a diagnosis, we knew that there was a challenge. And at that point, had I known then what I know now, I could have reached out to the early childhood, early intervention sector with just what I had, just the highlight of these are the delays, these are the challenges, these are the issues. And we might have been eligible for early access that way. But I didn't know that. So I just went through the process, and it wasn't until after we got a diagnosis that our paediatrician talked to us about getting NDIS support.
Yep. Okay. So I think from my understanding of it is that if a child is flagged with 2 areas of development that there are delay in, that's when Uniting Care can help and start supporting them. But yeah, it obviously helps if you've got like a early childhood, like if you're at a daycare setting or a kindy setting and you start collecting those information reports, definitely helps get access.
Absolutely.
So now that a family knows that they're eligible, they know what the process is, what should families prepare before their first NDIS planning meeting? So this is where like an NDIS coordinator will come out to your house generally, and they'll start filling out all the paperwork and asking so many questions, the goods and the bads of your child. And that can be a difficult process as well. But what are the big ones that families could prepare for to get the most support for their child?
I think the biggest thing, and it was for me, the most challenging part is, as a parent, your natural instinct is to talk about the best parts. I mean, I could fill your entire podcast telling you how clever my son is and how funny he is and how warm he is and how lovely. I mean, I can just keep going. But that's not what they need to know. They need to know on his bad days, on his bad times, when he is struggling, what does that look like? And things that you've probably already just put into practice yourself, like slight adjustments that you make. Like I know that for me, I guess it comes back to that isolating thing you were talking about before, but we had already stopped going to barbecues that happened at 12 because he would sleep from 12 till 2. But if he missed that window, there was no nap, and then he couldn't cope and he would have emotional breakdowns because he didn't get the red cup. So we would already be turning down those invitations and saying, well, we can come at 2:30 after his rest time. So that's an adjustment that we were already making to accommodate his specific needs, which were probably additional needs than other kids his age had. So thinking about all of those things, I knew that at dinner time he liked the blue plate and the green cup, and that he would eat better if he had the blue plate and the green cup. And so I always had them washed and ready to go. That's an adjustment that I was making to accommodate his specific needs. I knew that he liked to have a really long shower and that it really calmed him down. Cranky baby, add water. It's still applicable now at 10. I knew that that was a really key component in our bedtime routine, but that's an adjustment. Those sort of things, like really having a really long, honest look at the little adjustments that might just be a part of your everyday life now, and going in prepared to talk about them and to talk about the not pleasant things, talk about the things that you maybe don't talk about often, that you don't publicize easily because they're hard and they're personal and they're private and they're really intimidating to list out. But that's what they need to know, because that's how they can then help you and ensure that there's enough funding there to have the services you need to keep those adjustments going, or to teach your child how to work without them.
Yeah. And also having an idea of what services you want for your child. So you might have a pediatrician referral to say, yes, they need speech and OT, but just have a play around with, okay, if you want speech, do you want it weekly, fortnightly? OT, do you want that weekly, fortnightly? Because that's going to play a big part of how much funding you actually get.
Yes.
Yep. And then if you want support coordination in your plan so that you know how to actually spend the funds, or if you want a support worker or a whole heap of other things. Social groups is a great one that I like to take my son to, but they're very limited in choices at the moment. But yeah, we do camps as well, and I think Loxley's done those mindware camps, and they're great.
Absolutely, they're brilliant.
Yep. They do them every holidays, and it's just part of our routine now.
Yep.
Absolutely love them.
Yeah, so much.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about your support coordination role, and so that parents know that they can actually apply to have that in their funding? Because it's not until they get their plan and they go, oh, well, I don't know how to use it now. So tell us a little bit about your role as a support coordinator.
Sure. So as a support coordinator, we work with participants once they have a plan, and you get funding allocating a certain number of hours of support coordination work per year. Not everybody gets it, but you can request it, particularly if you are not sure what to do with it. If you're not sure how to access these places or even what's available, we can help with all of that. Essentially what we do is when a plan comes in, we work with the participant to understand their funding, to understand what is covered in that plan, and then we help them do things like budget it. When you might need an assessment every year, so we work out, okay, well, that's roughly going to cost this much, which leaves you this, and that would look like monthly appointments for the duration of your plan. Or you've got this much funding for support work, which works out to be XYZ number of dollars per week. We can also talk to them about providers in the region and sort of connect them, link them up, help them set up meet and greets, that type of thing. Really, it's about helping a participant or their family to understand the plan, understand what they've got covered, understand what sort of gaps might be in their plan that they might need to consider getting some sort of mainstream service to fill. Talking to them about how to use that plan and how to maximize it, whether it be things like utilizing a therapy assistant instead of a physiotherapist. So you might get a physiotherapist to build what that physio plan looks like, but it's more affordable then if applicable, depending on the disability, if a therapy assistant who uses a lower rate of charge, whether they can then do some of the sessions to maximize out that value. So we work a lot with participants that way.
Excellent. So do you want to explain, so now that they've got their plan, they can choose to go NDIA managed, plan managed, or self-managed. Do you want to explain those three options?
Yeah, sure. So self-managed is essentially where you don't get the money. That's the first thing, I guess, that people need to understand. It's not like you have cold hard cash in your hand. You have access to the plan and you can utilize it for supports that are deemed appropriate within that funding limit. So self-managed would mean that if you go to a speech therapist, you might pay the bill, you take that receipt and you upload it to the NDIA portal, and then they would reimburse you for the cost of that therapy.
And how long does it take for them to reimburse that invoice? Do you know?
Depending on times, but I normally get within 24 to 48 hours. So it's not a long turnaround, but if you're like me and you forget to upload the receipt straight away, that'll slow you down as well. But 24 to 48 hours usually. Then you've got a plan managed option. And again, this is where it's tricky because you sort of need to know about this before you go to your planning meeting. So a plan manager is essentially someone who will manage and pay the bills for you. So you would then go to your speech therapist, for example, and tell them, my plan manager is such and such a business, and this is their email address and their phone number and all of their details. And rather than them asking you to pay the bill at the time, they will send that bill to the plan manager, who will then pay it from the NDIA funding for you. NDIA managed means that the provider, again, so your speech therapist, they will send the bill directly to the NDIA and the NDIA will reimburse them. If you utilise NDIA managed, you can only go through registered providers that are directly linked to the NDIA. So that will limit some of the choices of services as well.
Yep, excellent. So, as your role as a support coordinator, you don't actually deal with clients until they get their plan. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. Yep.
And then you can guide them. But now that they know that they can get access to support coordination in their plan, because sometimes they get their plan and they go, okay, what do I do next?
That's right.
And that's when they can reach out to you. So do you want to give your business a little bit of a spiel about where you work and how people can actually get access to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work at Magenta Community Services and we're here in Toowoomba. We also have offices in Gladstone and Lismore. It's a beautiful company run by beautiful people who have first-hand experience with people with disability, whether it be their family members or extended family, partners, children. We have different business units. So we have support provision, support workers. We also have plan management services. We have support coordination services, and we also work in my aged care. I think choice of provider is really important as well. Like it's these people, if you're getting a support worker or a support coordinator or anybody, they're directly involved with your child. They're directly involved in their life. They have to know certain things about you and about your child in order to best provide support. And I think it's really important for people to find providers that can connect with you and connect with your child and with their needs and have the right people there. Something worse than having somebody try and work with your child when they're just not clicking. And I guess that's really important for people to know as well. And that's something that as a support coordinator we often deal with is parents will say, oh, look, I mean, they're not doing anything wrong. They're lovely. But so it's really important for people to know that you have that choice and you can go and do other meet and greets and you can find other providers. And that's something that I know that Magenta's really focused on is having the right people with the right clients so that that connection is there and so that we can offer the best service possible and make sure that everyone is not just comfortable but happy to be there and happy to be a part of it.
Okay, so once the clients have their plan in place and they've started using these services, NDIA also requires them to have, like, their plan only goes for 12 months, or some plans actually go for 24 months. So what's involved once they've started using services? They might be like nearing their allocation of funds. What's the process then after coming up to 12 months or 2 years?
Yeah. So usually an NDIA planner will reach out to the family and let them know that in 12, 14 weeks, your plan is coming up to its end date and we'd like to have a planning meeting. So being prepared for a planning meeting is knowing that the NDIA is an insurance scheme. It's an insurance agency. It's all evidence-based. So going into a planning meeting, you're essentially prepping for what the next plan is going to look like. So you want to be asking all of your providers to write you a progress report and let the NDIA know this is what we worked on with this child. This is how we work towards these goals. This is what we think the next 12 months or the next 2 years is going to look like for this child. And particularly with children, their development is constantly growing and changing, as is their needs. So being able to reassess, well, perhaps they had trouble in this area before, but they've actually got really good at that now. But now we've identified this as an issue. So now we want to work on that moving forward. Having, again, that same process of really clear ideas on what your child is going to need moving forward. And it's really important to have that written evidence, that proof from the services that you have used NDIA funds for. Your occupational therapist, your speech therapist, they can all do new assessments. They can all do reports and recommendations, whether it be a functional capacity assessment. That's a really big one, the functional impact that this disability has on the day-to-day life of a participant. That's a crucial factor in how NDIA determine what you're getting moving forward. So having reports that spell that out and can evidence what you need and why you need it and how to apply it, that will build the basis of your next plan. So if you have those things ready and you can take them into your planning meeting and you can give them to your planner and you can show them, this is what I've done with the funding, this is what I'd like to do moving forward, this is how I'd like to help, this is how we need support moving into the next 2-year phase, that's what they'll be looking for.
Excellent. And as a support coordinator, do you help with any of that process, or it's just the participants reach out to the services that they use, or you do help?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a support coordinator on board coming up to your plan review time, that's when they will start working with you and trying to identify, first of all, with you, with the participant itself, themselves, on exactly what is needed next, what those new gap areas are, what we review the goals that were in the last plan, and because we've been working with you, we know what you've been doing about that. So that's when we start getting those provider progress reports, updates. We can get new assessments organised with you and with the providers, have a look at those reports, work with you about what they have recommended, and essentially form it into a little bit of an overview going into that next planning meeting. And a support coordinator can actually go with the participant and their family to the planning meeting and help talk through those processes as well.
Excellent. So much information there for our listeners, Brooke. Is there anything else that you think our listeners need to know around that NDIS process, or do you think we've pretty much covered everything?
I think we've covered everything. I think it's really important just to do research. The NDIA website is big, but there's actually a real lot of information on there and a lot of step-by-step guides. And particularly in that childhood space, reach out to the early childhood, early intervention team. They're really knowledgeable about getting access and about eligibility and about what you need moving into it. And they're very willing to talk and help you. And I think, again, I just come back to what you said in the beginning, that isolating feeling and that gut punch of hearing it all for the first time. Let that settle and feel that for a minute, and then just start researching, gather as much information as you can, talk to as many people as you can, and just know that everybody who's building their first plan, I know I felt like I was the first person to be struggling with it, but you're not. And they're really used to that, and they're there to help. That's what they're there for. So
Excellent. Okay. Thanks so much, Brooke, for coming on the podcast. Now, for our listeners, you can find Brooke at Magenta Community Services. Do you guys have a Facebook, Instagram, website? What's the best way to contact you? Everything?
Definitely, we've got all of it. But yeah, I would definitely recommend, if anybody is interested in one of our services, to have a look at our website, and then there's contact links straight on there for you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming again, Brooke, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.